On Monday, the U.S. recertified that Iran was complying with the terms of the nuclear deal. But is the U.S. itself complying? Listen closely to what White House spokeswoman Sarah Huckabee Sanders said in her briefing just a few days earlier.
In his discussions with more than a dozen foreign leaders, he underscored the need for nations to join together to strip terrorists of their funding, territory, and ideological support, and to stop doing business with nations that sponsor terrorism, especially Iran.
In this one brief statement following the G20 meeting, Huckabee Sanders may have openly admitted that the United States is for the first time not complying with its agreement with Iran and other Western nations. That agreement says the U.S. can't pursue a policy that adversely affects the normalization of trade and economic relations with Iran. Iran is arguing that the U.S. is not complying with that agreement.
When the White House made an announcement a couple of days ago that President Trump used his presence in Hamburg during the G20 meeting in order to dissuade leaders from other countries to engage in business with Iran, that is a violation of not the spirit but of the letter of the JCPOA, of the nuclear deal.
The Russians, which often align with Iran, have weighed in too.
This is a situation when the U.S. action or lack of action contradicts the very essence of the document and thus is incompatible with the letter and the spirit of the JCPOA.
The nuclear deal has paved the way for some commerce to resume between Iran and the West. U.S.-based Boeing signed a $3 billion deal with the country's Asaman Airlines this spring. And in June, Iran's oil exports to the West hit its highest level since the lifting of sanctions. But President Trump spent the campaign season rallying against the Iranian nuclear agreement.
Never, ever, ever in my life have I seen any transaction so incompetently negotiated as our deal with Iran.
And so he's looked for new ways to challenge Iran by imposing sanctions that would target not those companies covered under the nuclear agreement, but instead those involved in cyber and military programs, and things the U.S. says contribute to Iran's exporting of terrorism. The question is whether its bad-mouthing Iran at the G20 was aimed at the business entities protected under the nuclear deal.
Articles of the JCPOA do not include a general exception for terrorism or anything else. So to try to persuade other world leaders not to do business with Iran generally does seem to be a pretty clear instance of noncompliance with paragraph 29 of the JCPOA.
If the U.S. isn't in compliance, there likely won't be any material penalties immediately, but it could thwart future negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, if not ultimately kill the nuclear deal altogether.